there! Did you know that over 7,000 people get bitten by venomous snakes in the US every year? Isn't that crazy? It's like you don't even think that that's even a real threat out there, but it really is. Today I want to talk about threats, but not snakes and bears or lions or tigers. I want to talk about cyber threats. We did a webinar just a couple weeks ago. I'm going to put a link right here. And you can go and watch it, but one part of the webinar that people gave us feedback on was a part that I did on like a threat update. I went over some IPS reports and I highlighted a few areas there, and we got a lot of feedback saying, hey, this is great, can you do more of these type of things? So here I am doing more of these type of things. And I do want to start with going back and reviewing exactly what we did. It was actually just last week. So I wanted to highlight in this recent article here, this is from this month here, out of 127 devices that were tested, none of them were free from severe vulnerability. So what does severe vulnerability mean? That means that an attacker can use exploit code to get into the router and put code on there and further move into your home from that router. So this becomes an entry point for the attacker to get into the rest of your home. This is the router, the gateway that's supposed to be preventing anything from coming in, and yet it's enabling attackers to come in. And on another article, 79 Netgear, just Netgear alone devices were checked, and they had vulnerabilities going back to 2007. That means they were around for a long time. So an article here from the CISA, right, and this is about Netgear router vulnerabilities and about other ones, but they specifically state here, given the increase in telework, and this is what we talked about in the webinar, is that teleworkers pose a threat. The increase in telework, the CISA recommends that CISOs, or Chief Information Security Officers, consider the risk that these vulnerabilities present to the business network. So that means that they present a threat to the home, but because they present a threat to the home, they also present a threat to the business network. And we talk about that in detail in the webinar there. But the key part here is what I wanted to do is look at the actual IPS data. What we're blocking as OmniNet, we're blocking globally up there. And what I did is I pulled some logs and pulled some reports, and some of the top blocks that we have out there, we looked at that, and this isn't just something that you see in a news article or somebody stating out there as a potential threat. We're actually, if you look over here, the top 20 threats, right? In the top 20 threats, we see actually 5 exploits that we're blocking that are attacking different types of home routers, right? We see the Lynxes there, the Netgear, and a few other ones that are a little bit less popular, but we see all of these and we see constant attacks, and these are in the top 20 attacks that we're seeing globally. And another thing that I wanted to show here is in the top 20, we had an attack on a Wi-Fi cam. So overall, what we're seeing here is attackers are refocusing who they're attacking. They know that everybody's working from home, they're not in the offices, and they know this is an easy entry point for them. And we're seeing this in the data, we're seeing this in the logs, in the global logs of what's actually going on out there in the world and what attackers are doing. Another thing I wanted to show you is this. So we see Office Anywhere exploits, right? So these, again, show that there's a spike in attacks that are focused around people working remotely. The other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to focus on how old these threats are, right? So we've been seeing this for a long time, but I just really wanted to highlight this. So I took a chunk of some of the threats in the IPS data, and I specifically left in the CVE numbers, because the CVE numbers show the year that this was introduced. And some of them have multiple CVE numbers, but as you can see here, a big chunk of these are 3 years or older, right? And the reason why that's important is we focus on smaller businesses, and there's a lot of other equipment there that focus on smaller businesses that has IPS. They check the box, we have an IPS, but all IPSs aren't created equal. The more you scan for, the more you inspect for, the slower things will be, the harder it is to keep up with the performance. And when you have a box that's on-prem doing this type of stuff, it's very difficult to do that without having more and more horsepower, which makes it extremely expensive. It's kind of that trichotomy. You have cost, security, and performance, and there's a trade-off always for those type of things. So the trade-off that they always do is they lower the security, and the typical thing to do is you include the last 3 years of signatures, and anything past 3 years, you take it out. So that is exactly the reason why we're seeing that vulnerabilities, attacks that are older than 3 years are on the rise, and they constantly are. Something will go dark, there's a new attack, a new exploit, it'll go dark, and then all of a sudden in 3 years it reemerges again, because they know that those IPS signatures are typically already gone, and if something's vulnerable, they have a better shot at attacking it. Even if you have some of these small business, the small office, home office type of firewalls with IPSs built in. So another thing I want to look at is attacks over HTTP and HTTPS. So a couple interesting things here. We see a big spike in attacks with Apache struts. This is a type of web application found on very many things. Apache is also often found on embedded devices. So again, this kind of shows that there's a spike in attacks in the IoT of things, in devices, a lot of devices that are found at home as well. And also you can see here that the router attacks are also on the rise still. And this is a more recent report than the one you just saw. So these are still out there. And the one other interesting thing here is this Barco exploit. So if you don't know, Barco makes projectors, right? And now a lot of times these projectors, they have something like an operating system built in and everything. So we're seeing here that even projectors are having these are coming up in our top 20, top 30 type of attacks out there. And a projector, right? A Barco, this is kind of a high-end projector. We're seeing a lot of attacks on something like a projector. So you can see that the attacks are starting to shift from like the basic type of attacks that were before, and they're really attacking your Office Anywhere, your IoT of things, even your projectors, and a lot of this type of stuff. So let's shift really quickly over to content filtering. I want to highlight a few things here, kind of explain what we're seeing. So a few things here. There's a lot of advertising, no surprise there, right? We block a ton of it. The other thing here is number 4 on the list is malicious websites. So this typically doesn't come up this high, but we could see here that now we see a lot more people working from home. People are more casual to click on things, and it kind of shows the human behavior. When they're in their office, they tend to, you're in an open office and you tend to be careful what you're opening, where you're clicking on. You're not like going to questionable websites. But here all of a sudden we see this spike in malicious websites. And so what does this mean? That means that attackers are really ramping up their game. And number 2 is because now we're defending more home users, we're seeing a spike in this when users are clicking on malicious links, trying to go to malicious websites. And so we're definitely seeing a spike in blocking that category of clicks there in web filtering. The other thing that's interesting is phishing is kind of lower on the list there, right? There's overall a little over 100 categories, and phishing is number 17. You'd think it'd be higher. So why is that? You have anti-spam software, right? Anti-spam systems that filter out a lot of the phishing email, because a lot of the phishing comes in over email. And because a lot more people are integrating that, and pretty much all systems, if you're using Gmail, Office 365, it pretty much has that built into the system, and it's getting better and it's getting pretty good. That means that there's a lot less phishing email coming in and a lot less people actually clicking on those phishing links. Also, I think people are kind of understanding, starting to realize that don't just click on anything, right? Watch what you're clicking on. People are getting a little more educated. So it is further down on the list. But although it's further down on the list, it's still in the top 17, right? It's number 17 there. That means that these phishing or these anti-spam systems aren't doing a perfect job. And educating the users isn't doing a perfect job, right? So this is where you need that multi-layer of defense, where you have an anti-spam system, you do educate your users, but then you also have a technology that will catch those clicks, even if the user does happen to click on those things. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the botnets. There's nothing really much here to explain. Botnets are just ways of what we call an agent. It's just a small piece of malware. Oftentimes, it's just a script that it gets on the user's computer and then goes out and connects to a command and control server or a botnet server, and then it communicates. And that's where it pulls down the more malicious type of stuff, like a crypto locker or something like that, ransomware or something else. And you can see these are the top 5 botnets that we've been seeing the last week. These sometimes shift over time, but some of these have been around for a while and we see them pretty often. And of course, we do block this type of communication. So even if somebody does happen to put something on their computer and it's going out there and communicating, we'll block this type of activity. And we do send out alerts saying that, hey, this computer is infected with something. It's trying to communicate using this botnet server. Typically, we see it's XYZ, and this is what you need to do to remove that. So I hope you enjoyed this update. I know it's a little bit technical, and if you had a hard time following along, let me know. If you enjoyed the update, let me know. If there's certain things that you did like about it, please let me know in the comments. And hopefully we'll be doing a lot more of these, so subscribe, like, and leave your comments below. And thanks for watching.